I guess we could call it a new deal for Ja Morant and the NBA. Adam Silver and the association laid down their suspension today. As predicted, it was right after the NBA Finals, which I agreed with. They didn't take attention off of the Finals. And they did it after the parade that anointed the Nuggets champions in their city. They didn't take away any of the buzz from the Nuggets championship victory. 25 games is the suspension for Ja Morant from the NBA, and it includes parameters and conditions that must be met in order for Morant to be back into the league, back into the schedule. Based on 25 games, if the schedule is virtually the exact same as last year, it puts him back around the second week of December, middle of December at worst. And there are parameters where he has to, abide by and check off in order for Silver to let him back in. I think this could have been accomplished by just saying indefinite suspension. 25 games or not, indefinite suspension would allow the parameters to be met regardless of a timetable. Because right now, everyone's expecting him back by the time the regular season actually begins. The tip-off, the unofficial tip-off, at least for me, has always been around Christmas Day. And that's whenever the Grizzlies get their star player, their max contract guy, Ja Morant, back in. I don't hate this suspension, though, based on the monetary aspects and the detriment to his bank account and the message that it should send. I'm not saying it will, should send to one of the best players in the NBA about conduct detrimental to the league. His previous suspension of 8 games was on a previous contract, and it amounted to roughly $600,000, give or take. 25 games on the new contract, which will be enforced and it goes into effect this coming NBA season on the max deal, the 5-year contract that he signed, that's going to cost him $7 million. In comparison, if you go around the league and look at some fines, Donald Sterling, and the entire saga with the Clippers, he was fined $2.5 million. I get it. He was able to sell the Clippers. He got away with $2 billion at the end of all this. But in terms of maximum fines that we've seen, $2.5 million to the ownership there, plus $3.5 million. That's the most the NBA has fined a franchise. The Minnesota Timberwolves were fined $3.5 million for tampering on a player years ago. Point being, I don't see this as light, but I also will view it differently if he's just automatically back in like he was the last time after a drive-through consultation down in Florida for management issues on how to handle himself. But here's the other thing to take into account. The suspension, I think, is viewed as 25 games. The suspension starts now. And this guy couldn't make it 2 months after the last time he met with Commissioner Adam Silver before he did it again, before he was flashing a gun live on social media. And whatever excuse, there are no more excuses for Ja Morant in the eyes of the NBA. Actions now speak louder than words, regardless of whatever statement ChatGPT wrote for him this time. It doesn't hold any weight based on the way they handed this down. I understand that 25 games seems light whenever the discussion was half a season, full season. They're going to come down hard. But when you look at the monetary aspect of it, combined with whatever they're going to lay out for him, as long as they are real about that, this should be Ja Morant proving that he can go from June until December without doing anything. I don't believe he can, because we've been talking about this dude every month doing something else for a year. So if he can prove between now and December that he can stay off the social media landscape, he can stay off of the headlines and out of the waving of the firearms and doing things that Silver pointed out in a statement that he feared that others looking up to him would mock and repeat. If he can actually do that, then the NBA will let him play. If not, he's not coming back by December. They will extend this. That's not in the statement, but it's clear he can't get away with this anymore based on the way Silver laid things out.
Well, I think the suspension that I was looking for, expecting, was at least half a season. So we're talking about the difference between 16 games, which is significant. So I'm not going to sit here and say 25 games is nothing, but he got off easy. 25 games to me is getting off easy in this deal for Ja Morant.
Well,
now, it's not nothing. He lost $36 million this past year because he would have had an automatic escalator to a supermax deal if he was first-team All-NBA, which he was not because of his suspensions. So he cost himself $36 million this past season. He's going to cost himself, I think, the number $7 million over the first 25 games of this season. It's significant financially, sure. Could have been more significant had it been half a season. Could have been a lot more significant had it been a full season. NBA Players Association is saying too harsh. It's too harsh of a penalty. Of course they are.
That's
what they're supposed to say. They're the union.
Yeah.
They're going to come out and say it's too harsh. He didn't break any laws. He's not been charged with a crime, yada, yada, yada. Bottom line is this. I don't believe Ja Morant right now. The apology and statement he released after the NBA released their statement is word for word what he said back when the whole investigation happened with the Pacers and the red laser pointer being focused on the team bus. Back when he had the first issue with the gun in the strip club. This all sounds the exact same. I don't believe him. I don't think many people believe Ja Morant right now. Now, the good news for Morant is he can go and prove us wrong. He can go make us believe in him again. That's the beauty of second, third, fourth chances, and that's what he's getting right now. So if he keeps his nose clean and has no problems for the next year, and he goes out and he's a great teammate and a great player again this NBA season, I'll start believing Ja Morant a little bit more again.
But here's where I actually agree with Silver, and I think the part of his statement, and we're not going to read Ja Morant's because, again, like it's actions more than words. But Silver's statement this time is different than the one he released last time after meeting with him back in March. For Ja, this is the point that I think Silver is making that I think is the most difficult for Ja Morant to uphold. For Ja, basketball needs to take a backseat at this time. Prior to his return to play, he will be required to formulate and fulfill a program with the league that directly addresses the circumstances that led him to repeat the destructive behavior. Now, the last go-around, it was an 8-game suspension that included the time away already, which was roughly, I believe, 16 or 17 days total. Now he's got to go 6 or 7 months. That's going to be the toughest part for this dude. He's got to go 6 or 7 months, as well as adhering to whatever policies are in place by the NBA and the fines that will be accrued based on the games he's going to miss. He's not around any team activity, private or public, between now and then. And he can't show any aspect of what has already been done to lead us to today's outcome. So it's a 6-month or 7-month trial for him to prove that he can actually do things the way the other NBA players do things. Do I think other NBA players have guns on them? Yes. They're also admitting they're not flashing them on Instagram Live at any chance they get, no matter who's filming. And in this case, the most recent one, it was his buddy in the driver's seat. Point being, he's got to prove, Chad, regardless of when he's back. It's a 25-game suspension. It's actually a 6-month run where he's got to prove he can be exactly who the NBA expects him to be.
He tripled his suspension from last time, right? 8 games after the last incident. So essentially tripled that suspension with 25. So, again, not nothing, but I think he got off easy because I thought it was going to be minimum half a season, which would have been another 15, 16 games. Now, I do want to address Ace on the YouTube chat who asked this question. He continues to ask it every time we bring up this topic, and I'll continue to answer the exact same way. I asked this question before, but if Ja Morant does something in a responsible way, like do a video from a legit gun range, would it be an issue? Now, this has been asked before this happened, and what would the response be versus now? Let me give you both answers here. If Ja Morant, if his only issue started out with an Instagram Live video shooting a lawfully obtained firearm that he owned and had a carry permit for at a firing range, I don't think anything would have happened at all. Now, maybe someone would have said, hey, let's not just pose with our guns and be about that. You know, maybe not a good look on social media, but nothing would have happened. But you add everything on top of each other with Ja Morant, all of his issues, all of his incidents involving guns or threats of violence, and it stacks on top of each other. And now any issue involving a gun, whether illegal or not, is a mark against his reputation and a mark against the league and what they can do to him. So, yeah, before it would have been no problem. But when you build up a rep, the way Ja Morant has built up that rep, any issue with a gun on video is going to be a problem. If Ja Morant on Thanksgiving weekend, while serving his suspension, decides to go with his buddies to a gun range with his legally obtained gun and shoot that gun on video, then Adam Silver should add the rest of the season to his suspension because he has been warned repeatedly now. Is it illegal? No. Can you do that in America? Absolutely. Am I okay with the right to do that in America? Yes, 1,000%. But when you work for a company and you make as much money as Ja Morant does with the National Basketball Association, you adhere to a higher standard. And when you set yourself up after failure to adhere to that standard, then you can't do anything like that again. I hope I made myself perfectly clear with that moving forward. That's the expectation for Ja Morant.
It would be a taunt at Silver at this point.
Yeah, it's him.
Based on the message sent.
It's him essentially making fun of everyone once again and saying,
by the way,
I don't
care. Go to a gun range. Do whatever you want legally. But the NBA is saying don't flaunt it on social media.
Keep your phone in your pocket.
Do whatever you want.
To Ja Morant and his buddies.
Yes.
And you can get away with a lot of things. I mean, this is not rocket science. We're not asking him to do something that the majority of Americans are able to accomplish every day. Not posing in a strip club with a gun. Most of us get away with that most every day. I mean, come on. Stop the apologizing for this guy. If you are a Grizzlies fan or a Ja Morant fan, be on your knees right now thanking God and thanking Adam Silver that it's only 25 games. You got dealt a huge break in this deal. I hope that Ja Morant figures it out and has no other issues, and we're not talking about this a year from now, and instead we're talking about how the Memphis Grizzlies are an NBA championship possible team. I hope that's the case. But right now, I don't believe him. He's given me no reason to believe him.